yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir, for the wonderful introduction. I have an introduction slide coming up, but it was, we had an opportunity to, and I've kind of wanted to do this for a while, is kind of discuss ground zero with EAB. There's a lot of things that we tried and didn't work, and a lot of things that we tried that did work that helped develop what we do today throughout North America for emerald ash borer. I've been on the ground, got dirty, did the treatments, did a lot of the development with our research department on a lot of the tools that we're using today. Pretty good inside track on how everything went through the years. It's not going to be a sales, it's going to be more of a webinar to help maybe address some of your questions as we go about emerald ash borer. You may have dealt with it already and you may not have, but if you haven't and you got ash trees anywhere near you, you're going to. So a little bit about Arborjet. I love the new logo, the Arborjet 20 years. Arborjet started in the mid 90s, but it wasn't incorporated till 2000. Somewhere between 2000 and 2001, I reached out to Arborjet. I was working for a private tree care company in Detroit metropolitan area, and got to know Arborjet early in their development. And we all know what hit the fan in 2002 was I guess the terminology that we use is emerald ash borer was discovered. I kind of like to switch that up just a hair, and it was when emerald ash borer was identified. We've had problems with ash trees, and if you've been in arboriculture, there's so many other things that could be going wrong with ash trees, and they've been declining in Southeast Michigan for years before we identified exactly what it was. 2018, we acquired a controlling interest in another company, Ecologel and BioPro Solutions, which is we're bringing some more products to the field of arboriculture in the ways of our Arbor RX program. We design, develop, manufacture our own. One of the things that makes me proud is that we're committed to environmental responsibility. And what's great is we have an inside research and tech lab where we can actually engineer and design our products. So it's a fun company to work for, and we're celebrating our 20-year anniversary. Again, my name's Joe Aiken. When I first hired in with Arborjet, there was 4 other Joes. So we all kind of took on a persona, and one that was easy for me was Arborjet Joe, and it kind of stunk. Not stunk, but it stuck through all these years. So Arborjet Joe, if you guys ever reach out and try to figure out which one you're trying to get hold of, that's me. Great Lakes in Canada, technical manager. I got my name and everything on there, but we will have this on the end if you guys don't get a chance to write it down. I've been a certified arborist probably 20, 25 years. I've been on the former board member of Michigan's ISA chapter. I am the president of the Arboriculture Society of Michigan Foundation, which is an organization that we developed. And underneath that is the history of arboriculture. Some of you guys may have seen at an ISA event, Columbus or Knoxville, some of the history of arboriculture. And again, I've been with Arborjet for almost 18 years. So there's only 2 of us left from the beginning. And one is Joe DeCola, our head of research, and myself. Next on today is Emmett, and I'll let Emmett chime in and say a little about himself, but this was kind of his brain child here to kind of come back to Michigan and understand what happened and how it's going to help him. And he can tell a little bit about himself and where he's from and why this is a good idea. So Emmett.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so I'm the South Central technical rep. I'm in the Dallas, Texas area, and emerald ash borer was found in Fort Worth actually in 2018, and we're going to talk a little bit about that find because it's got a unique story to it. But I've been working, I cover Kansas and Missouri. EAB was found in Kansas City in 2012. And so I've been working with the pest for, since I've been with Arborjet for the last 6 years. And basically, as I go around and I do the presentation, your typical signs, symptoms, management presentation that most everyone has seen at one point or another, I get the questions, well, what's the case in Michigan? What is happening there? Why, are the trees all dead? Have ash trees sprouted back? Is EAB still a problem there? And, so I thought it'd be a great idea now that we're, not traveling and we have the opportunity to do these web presentations to get Joe on, and so that he can give that kind of perspective of it. And then I can give kind of the perspective of a new area and what to expect with that. And Joe, if you click next, I got a tree joke.
Is this the big ash tree, or do you want to keep going?
Yeah, that's a big ash tree. That's all. That's my one tree joke. So we're all those RTMs at Arborjet, we're all tree nerds, and so part of being a tree nerd is you have to love big trees, and so that's a big ash tree right there. I think that was like a 51 incher. Not as big of an ash as what you've seen, Joe.
No, and we'll show that picture later of the largest white ash tree in North America.
All right.
So yeah, it's pretty amazing. So thanks, Emmett. So between Emmett and myself, we should have all of your questions answered. Like I said, throw them in the chat. We're going to probably take an opportunity. If Zach, if something comes up that's pertinent to that slide, please feel free to chime in. If it's something that we want to run a Q&A at the end, whatever is best for the audience. I just want to make sure that whatever the questions are asked, we get them answered. If it's not today, believe me, I'll get back out to you guys whenever I can.
You got it, Joe. I guess kind of appropriate being you're looking at some ash trees is how bad was the worst ash tree that has come back to your knowledge?
That's a great question. I've treated ash trees up to 60, 70, almost 80% dead and brought them back. Now, don't get me wrong that there was a lot of work to get it to read. Once we got emerald ash borer under control in that tree, there was a lot of dead wooding and a lot of love and a lot of babying. But believe it or not, and I didn't get a chance to go get that a picture, that tree is still standing in one of the neighborhoods not too far away. That tree is still alive due to an interjection by an arborist. So the recommendation is 30 to 40% is kind of like the draw the line. But even then, if you got the patience, you can bring that tree back. We'll kind of cover a little of that. I'll show you one of the first trees that was 80% in decline. We treated it. It continued to die. We dissected it, and there was some really great research that came out of it. But one of the things I tried to do is we're going to run this. This was yesterday. So one of the questions is there any ash trees left in Michigan? So I'm going to try to run this. Emmett, if it sounds good and you can hear it, thumbs up for me because I can see you on my screen. So here is a little clip. Hi, Joe Aiken with Arborjet, Senior Technical Rep here in Michigan. I wanted to introduce you guys to one of the trees that are, this tree right here, this ash tree is about 50 miles from ground zero. We're going to do a couple of short videos throughout the spring and fall as it leaves out to show you that, yes, there's still ash trees left in Michigan. This tree was treated. Is it good or bad? Should I skip by? What do you guys think?
I'd let it roll. It's actually the best video I've seen play over Zoom in a while.
All right. Zach says let her rip. All right. 7, 8 years ago, and my plan was to not treat it until I seen signs or symptoms of EAB. And this tree's been great ever since. The level of emerald ash borer is actually obviously declined here. but the regeneration has actually been pretty amazing in this area. This is tree number 1, and we're going to be taking a picture of another tree later this afternoon that has a pretty unique story to it. One of the other great things is that ground zero, 50 miles from, if you can check back behind over my shoulder, you'll actually see along the creek that there's actually 4 to 6 inch ash trees that have regenerated themselves or reseeded and survived. So there are still ash trees in Michigan. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll actually break bud. I'm going to do an aerial inspection. There's a few areas up in the canopy that kind of make me concerned. It's only because I've been keeping an eye on it. So next week we'll be in a canopy up here, and we'll try to look around and see what we can find, see if there's any signs or symptoms of emerald ash borer. So stay tuned for more exciting news from the field from Arborjet Joe. See you in a little bit. Bye. All right. So hopefully you guys got to hear that. Yeah, this is an important tree. I never told my wife that I wasn't treating it after the initial injection. This was early in the emamectin days. It was probably treated as soon as I had some in my hand. And I haven't touched it yet, but there have been trees around it that have passed and are no longer there. But this one was healthy enough. It's probably doubled and tripled in size, and it's just thriving. So yeah, there's ash trees here. And if you want to preserve them, we can. All right. I'm going to try not to go too fast. So as today's we're talking about emerald ash borer primarily, we'll jump right through this. I want you guys to see something it's kind of mind-boggling, in that there's a website called invasive.org that has not only insects, but diseases and plants and microorganisms and nematodes, and how many things are invasive in the continental US right now. The last time I checked, there was over 502 invasive insects. And this is a handful of them that myself, Emmett, and the rest of the RTMs are dealing with across North America on a daily basis. So, and you'll kind of see why this is very important, that you understand this as we continue to go on throughout the day or the presentation. One of the biggest problems that we're dealing with right now, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, is spotted lanternfly. One of our managers, Trent, manages the East Coast, sent me these pictures, and I'm just in awe of this insect. And if you guys don't know much about it, read up on it. It's our responsibility in the field to make sure that we know about it and we're looking for it and we can find it early. It's actually it's in the aphid family, 1.5 inches long. And if you look at the picture in the upper left-hand corner, you'll actually see it looks like it's black on the ground. That's sooty mold. That gets so bad with the excrement and the sooty mold and the honeydew that you can't even be underneath these trees. There could be 200,000 to 300,000 on this tree. And this is spreading west from southeast Pennsylvania right now. So keep your eyes on this. I know we're going to talk about EAB, but I wanted to show you that. So this is what we're talking about today. Emerald ash borer. Again, identified and finally put our finger on exactly what it was in 2002. A lot of the early research went back to, didn't understand. We were going about our business, and believe it or not, the initial thought was that this was ash yellows. If you're familiar with ash yellows, it dies back from the top down. So if you had an EAB tree and an ash yellows tree in the early phases, they'd look very similar. But then you had to get up close. So in the early stage, there was a lot of just windshield surveys. We really didn't understand what was going on. And it got to a point where Michigan State University put one of their pathologists, Dr. Dave Roberts, on it because they thought it was a disease. It took them a while to figure it out. And the only way that they found out that this was an insect is by extracting an EAB larva, which no one's ever seen before, and they sent it into the Smithsonian Institute to be identified. Once they found it, that it wasn't supposed to be here, everything hit the fan. So it's a beautiful insect. You can see it on the finger. And I kind of put a picture in the middle of the slide on the bottom, kind of trick you. It's not an emerald ash borer. And the reason I did that is that in the early days of EAB, anything that was green with the mass panic is that everybody thought it was emerald ash borer. So it was very important that still today that we identify exactly what insect it is before we come up with a treatment plan. And it's pretty neat how when Emmett has an opportunity to explain how it was discovered in Texas, I think it's an amazing story. In the Midwest, obviously, ash trees were a popular replacement for elms. It's a phenomenally successful street tree. And if you think about some of the communities up here in the Midwest around the Great Lakes, it could be 15, 20, 25, 30% of the urban trees in a municipality were ash trees. So you can kind of see how catastrophic this was in the early days for a lot of municipalities. And then the picture on the right is just an everyday example in the early days of emerald ash borer. We didn't know where the epicenter was. We didn't know when to treat, when not to treat. We had no idea if it was infested or not. And then trees were just dying before you could get a chance to get a hold of it. So understanding it, this is a great example of this was Minnesota. And what was happening in the early days of EAB and the community trees that municipalities had to come up with a plan. So it wasn't only private homeowners was a concern, it was a big concern for municipalities. So there was a lot of nightmares that happened. So here was a great example of, here's a beautiful street lined with ash trees. And what happened is that the city, this particular city decided that they had a plan and they implemented their plan and they never let the homeowners know. So when they all came home from work at the end of the day, this was their street. So you could kind of real quickly understand the shock that they had to come home to, and this was their street. After a few interviews, a lot of people drove right past the street and didn't even know it was still their street. And we know the value that trees provide for homes. And all those trees were in phenomenal condition, and they could have actually implemented a multifaceted program to preserve a lot of these trees. But in the early stages, there was a panic. There was no data to support that treatments were effective, and there was no data to support that these trees could survive long term. This is January this year. As you can see, 35 states and 4 provinces in Canada. In Canada, because I'm right on the front line in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, is the farthest west in Canada, which if you kind of look at the longitude right along the Mississippi there, you could actually really see that it hasn't really spread that far west as of yet. So there's kind of a line there. But if you were to cross this map to where the natural population of ash is, it kind of matches up. So wherever there's ash trees, you're going to find emerald ash borer eventually. This is, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you, Emmett. We're going to kind of jump into Texas a little bit here. And this is the first sign to show where 2018 it was found. So go ahead and tell a little bit about Texas, and I'll hit the slides for you.
Okay. Yeah, so it's been spread primarily, the movement of people have moved it around on firewood. And so most of the outreach through public extension or county extension, state extension is don't move firewood campaigns. And so I cover the state of Arkansas as well. And it was found there in, I think either 2014 or 2015 in the southwest part of the state. And that's a very rural area. Arkansas itself is pretty rural. And it was found out that like they tracked it back to a group of hunters from Ohio who had a deer lease in Arkansas. They brought it down. They brought a trailer full of firewood to their deer camp, and that's how it got started in Arkansas. More than likely, it was moved on wood into Tarrant County in Texas. Tarrant, that is Fort Worth. And so the story is really unique. what happened in the Fort Worth area, it was actually an 8-year-old kid that found it. He is a naturalist, and he's part of he posts things on a website. It's called inaturalist.org. And so he found this beetle in his backyard, and he took a picture of it, a grainy, blurry photo in his driveway of this beetle. And he posts it on this website, inaturalist.org. And he's like, hey, look at this cool looking bug I found. I think it's a Coleoptera species. And he just kind of hung out there, and some other people in that community started chiming in. No, I think it's a buprestid species. And it kind of went back and forth until one of the Texas Parks and Wildlife people saw it. And so I think the kid posted it in 2017, and then in 2018, the Texas Forest Service actually confirmed that it was emerald ash borer. Like, the kid didn't still have the bug, and so they had to wait until later to get back out there and trap. And anyways, they found the insects in 2018. But it's just really a fascinating story, and the media really ran with it because it's just so cool that a kid found this and had what 8-year-old kid is posting pictures of bugs on the internet to where the media can kind of spread the word. Go back to that slide, Joe. And so here's a picture of the Fort Worth area. And so where it was found is near the Fort Worth Nature Center and Refuge. Last year I went there and I treated, there's a regional champion green ash. It was, how big is it? I think it was a 55-inch ash tree in this nature center, big green ash. And so basically in Texas, the ash trees are in the riparian areas, the low-lying, the creek beds, river bottoms. It only represents about 4% of the urban canopy. So compared to the Midwest, it's a much fewer trees percentage-wise. However, talking to Alan Smith of the Texas Forest Service, in this 15-mile radius that you can see on the map, which represents about 906 square miles, there's estimated to be, oh man, I'd have to look back. I think it was over 1 million ash trees in that area. And so it's only 4% of the population, but there is a lot of trees. And so what that circle is, what that radius represents, is the treatment recommendation. If you're within 15 miles of an EAB find, you need to start treating your trees. And so a lot of these trees are going to be urban. The ash trees are very popular to be planted. They're a hardy tree. We have a species called the Arizona ash, which was planted widely in the 70s and 80s. It's a fast-growing ash tree. And in Texas, shade is super important. So a lot of these are in backyards, shading homes, providing a lot of value in terms of energy savings and keeping people cool. And so some of the common ash species is the Arizona ash, Texas ash, green ash, and white ash. Ash is relatively easy to identify. They have opposite branching. There's not many tree species that have opposite branching. And then they have the pinnate style leaves with 7 to 9 leaflets per leaf. And then the fruit is a samara or a paddle-like fruit shape. And so these are some common things you can look at to identify an ash tree. And it's really, in terms of treatment, you don't have to be a tree expert. All you have to do is identify the ash, and that tree is in threat. I've been in some neighborhoods that the whole area, the neighborhood I live in is one of them, lots and lots of ash trees through here. And so it's not, in terms of municipalities, it's not something they have tens of thousands that they manage in the right-of-ways or in the parks. But for homeowners, it's going to be really devastating throughout the Dallas Metroplex.
Awesome. Another thing is, if you think about, I've never, obviously the hybrid, the Arizona ash and the Texas ash, I've never heard of. I said, I used your joke inadvertently. But up in the Midwest, green ash, white ash, farther south, southern Ohio into Kentucky, you get into the blue ash, which is a beautiful tree. If you've ever seen the twigs on that, they're kind of squared off. Black ash is really big up here, has a lot to do with the First Nation. And we had pumpkin ash. So there are a lot of ash trees. And just so you know that every one of them are susceptible to EAB. Some of them are a little bit slower than others. Obviously, it seems like the green ash go first. And the data supports that because it's rough bark. It has enough fissures to lay eggs on, so therefore the eggs are protected for the season in those fissures, and they could lay more eggs on the trees. But there's a lot of ash species, and I'm not sure of any right now that have made it out of this alive. So there's ash species that do better. Blue ash, for some reason, down south, ward this off naturally all by themselves. So there are ash species that are doing great, but they're all going to get it. Real quickly, emerald ash borer has been around, so I didn't want to spend too much time in life cycle, but I did want to cover that when this was brought here into Southeast Michigan, they feel it was packing material from Asia. It had to have came over on green pallet wood in the form of a larvae. So the larvae had enough moisture in that green pallet wood to complete its life cycle, pupate, grow over the winter, and emerge in the spring. Unfortunately, in Plymouth, where it is, there's a big a commercial industrial area with tons and tons of pallets back there and ash trees in the neighborhood right next door, where that adult could find it, found an ash tree, and completed its life cycle. We said that earlier that emerald ash borer was identified in 2002. There's a lot of research that Michigan State University, Dr. Deb McCullough said that it could even be possible that it could have been in the late 80s, early 90s when emerald ash borer was actually brought here. And it took that long to get to a level where people started to notice. So this could have been around for a long time before we even knew. But overwinters as a larva, pupates in the spring, emerges in the northern Michigan, northwest, Great Lakes area. When the black locust bloom is when the adults emerge. The adults have to feed for 2 weeks. Then they mate, lay their eggs, then they're gone. 3 weeks to 4 weeks max is the only time you see an adult. I think Emmett had a slide earlier. For time, I had to eliminate a few slides. He had one. I forgot where I was going with it, but the life cycle. Up in the north, even the life cycle could extend to 2 years. So 1 year life cycle, colder climates, maybe 2. So now that you know if you got ash trees, Emmett also mentioned that if you're within 15 miles of a known infestation to treat, that comes from the Ohio State University, Dr. Dan Herms, who was involved with all the initial research on emerald ash borer. It was amazing to get an opportunity to work with him and Deb McCullough, Dave Smithley, and some of the other great minds on emerald ash borer. He's the one that came up with, because we don't exactly know where ground zero is. We find an insect, we think this is it, but all the times it's not. It's generally somewhere else where you have this Typhoon Mary style tree that's just breeding that nobody knows where it's at. So when you're out and about, either you've dealt with emerald ash borer or not, the first thing that I spot is a change in the bark. They're just walking by, you can see it, it gets lighter. And as the woodpecker's talons, it's not that you don't notice the woodpeckering and the damage of the tree until later, but just them hopping around on the outer bark flex off the outer scales, and you can actually start to see a white pattern on the bark. And if you look at that tree, you'll probably even notice that the canopy is thin. Just there's something not natural about it. So those are your first 2 signs that maybe you should get over there and put your hands on that tree and take a good look around. Adults in the summer, you can see notchings on the leaves. It's kind of hard to use. Epicormic sprouts are huge. And then if you get up in there, D exit hole is a real telltale sign that you have a flat-headed borer in that tree. These two D exit holes aren't perfect, but I got one in a tree in my neighbor's woodlot yesterday. I'll show you later in the presentation. So understanding is that emerald ash borer, understanding exactly where it's at, understanding where the ash trees are in your community, and what to look for is key. Once you get up in there and you start looking around, what happens is that as the larva does the serpentine galleries, which we look on the lower right-hand corner, as the tree tries to compartmental over and wall that wound off, it causes bark splits. And if you pull that bark back, like you do in the center picture, you'll actually see the serpentine. So ash tree, declining canopy, serpentine galleries, it's probably a good chance that emerald ash borer is there. Here's actually a pretty good picture of it. Oh, you can actually see the parking lot trees kind of, one of the leaves are kind of staghorning back. Got up in there, peeled it back, and there was a gallery. So when you start noticing your ash trees just aren't right, you know you're in an area where emerald ash borers has been known to have been found, you're going to start to see this. There's a nice one that's probably 5 years out. All the leaves have been dead, died back. The tree's got a great solid root system. It's trying to sucker back out because you have that root to shoot balance. Inevitably, that's a removal right there. And I didn't take this picture, but I think it was my boss, Rob. But
no, those are my photos. Those are in Kansas City. Yeah.
So there is one that's no longer there. So you can see that there was one there, but just the progression of death to these ash trees is going to be, once you get to that peak, and I think I have a chart that shows the growth in the curve, you'll understand. So management options. This is a great slide. So now we know we got emerald ash borer. We identified it. We got ash trees. Now we're going to come up with a plan. Believe it or not, there's still people that feel that do nothing is a plan. And unfortunately, if you do what happened in the city of Detroit, the city of Detroit didn't have the resources, and it was caught behind the 8 ball of even understanding the emerald ash borer, that they did nothing, and believe it or not, they still have dead ash trees standing 15 years later. So they're still trying to get them all down. 3 years ago, when I was working with the city of Detroit on a project, they still had over 10,000 dead standing ash trees. Another active is remove proactively. I can't disagree with, but in between do nothing and remove proactively would be a survey. Not only a survey for a municipality, but a survey for your customers of what they have. And if it was a unaesthetically pleasing tree or a bad structured tree or in the wrong spot, or you had an opportunity, then yeah, removing it proactively is a great tool. Remove as they die. In the early stages, I would say that you could probably do it to be realistic. But what happens is as this progresses, it's going to get to the point where you're not going to be able to get them down fast enough. Treatments have been found to be highly effective. And we'll kind of get into some treatments in a little bit, or a combination of both. I say the last one, a combination of both. This is a very aggressive insect once it gets established in the community. Save the ones that you can. The ones that aren't important or small enough or not structurally sound, get rid of them. And then even as you treat, a lot of municipalities treated to slow the spread so they can come up with a better plan throughout the years. So a lot of great options. Some of the options we didn't have in the beginning in the Detroit metropolitan area.
Hey, Joe,
Yeah.
following pretty well with this slide. There's a gentleman from Nashville that's been treating his customers' trees for going on 5 years now. And in speaking with their extension agents down there, the extension agents still don't see any EAB or haven't identified it, even though it is a known insect there. He's starting to feel like he's got kind of a moral dilemma going on with, do I keep treating my customers' trees even though the governing body has been telling us that there really isn't anything there? He's kind of toss up. You got any advice for him?
Yeah, you know, it's the unfortunate thing is that I know that there is emerald ash borer down there, and Kentucky's shot. The big thing is that if you wait until you do see these trees decline, they're hard to bring them back. If there's enough value and that trees that he's treating has enough value for that customer, and that customer doesn't want to lose them, I would have them on a program. I really would. I would not take a chance on my customers' trees. And I don't think it's unethical because it is around and we don't know exactly where the epicenter is. I would be on that property annually. I would not treat them annually. There's compounds out there that we have that you don't have to. And I've been down there. I've walked some of the properties out in Franklin, and I've seen how beautiful these trees are down there and how beautiful these properties are. One estate had 36 beautiful ash trees in the front yard. If they were to lose them or start to lose them because they were trying to be, weren't sure, it would be devastating. So if there's enough value in that tree for that customer in that area, I would say I would probably treat. I hope that helps. So all kinds of things in the early ages, we tried everything. This is a great slide, and I left it in there because when I first started with this, we tried everything. At one time, Michigan State University was testing over 150 products, from tree injections to soil drench injections to basal bark sprays. It all trickled down to a handful of products that have any efficacy whatsoever. There is a option. There's a, let me see if it's the next slide. This one was treated with triage, but there is a, and I'll show you a picture of it. There is a brochure out there that's a joint project between all the university extensions that were on this research that shows you the products that work. Emamectin was developed. The real quick history on triage. When Arborjet got started, one of the concerns with arborists is that they didn't want to have to inject a tree annually. So Joe DeCola was trying to find a compound that would persist and create a residual within a tree. That's where triage came from. So when emerald ash borer, our first product, our imidacloprid, our Arborjet product, was very highly effective on emerald ash borer and still is. But because it's an imidacloprid and precipitates in the foliage, you didn't get a residual. And there was still a window where emerald ash borer could still decline and get that tree. So once triage was developed, stayed in solution was put into a tree, we created a whole new thought process on emerald ash borers that now it could actually be used in a eradication program. It was the first product that actually cleaned out trees almost 100%. Not just the adults that fed on, but the larvae. So there are other products out there. There's a lot of products out there, but triage, again, was developed for a residual to hold within a tree because the industry wanted it.
So real quick, that tree is in Kansas City. And so I took that photo when I was out working with the crew that Kansas City, Missouri, not Kansas City, Kansas, but Kansas City, Missouri treats about 6,000 trees, 6,000 ash trees. And so that earlier slide where you saw the tree was nearly dead and there's some stumps in the photo compared to this. And it's just such a huge difference that the treatments with triage makes. You know, it blows me away because you'll go in neighborhoods where all the trees have been treated and they look awesome, nothing on them. And then you come around to maybe a business district or an apartment complex where they haven't been treated and they're all failing. So it was found in Kansas City in 2012. And so they're really at the peak infestation right now, to where if the tree hasn't been treated, it's probably dead or dying.
When triage is being developed, again, we had a test plot in East Lansing, Michigan, just outside of campus. And Dr. Dave Smitley had a test site with a handful of trees. And Joe DeCola and I, when this compound was ready to be tried, gave us a handful of trees to go play around with. So we went to these neighborhoods And the following year, when we went out to evaluate treatments, you know, and he gave us a big spreadsheet and goes, all right, these are your trees. We could turn down a street in East Lansing and see dead, kind of dead, not too good, but boom, there would be a green tree just stand there glowing in the dark. And we knew after the first couple of rounds and the first couple of boulevards, after the first year of treatment, the triage trees stood out like they were fertilized. It was just amazing. And that's when the term, we finally had a silver bullet came out. And it kind of changed the game on emerald ash borer. And it was probably 2006, 2007. But yeah, it's a phenomenon that it actually looks like the tree's been fertilized also. So it's pretty cool. Some of the key facts, if you take home a couple things, emerald ash borer can be management. There's a lot of resources out there. Treatments are highly effective. I'll show you a couple of early slides in a little bit, in a couple of minutes. I know we're running out of time. I'm going to try to speed things up so we end on time, but even trees under attack may be saved, but I don't recommend waiting that long. In the science says, if you want it, contact us. It's easier and less expensive to treat than it is to remove and replant. This is kind of the curve I was talking about. I think that when I treated that tree in my backyard, I was probably around 9 or 10 years into it. And then all the trees around died and the population of emerald ash borer diminished. It's coming back, and I'm going to show you guys some slides. So once you get past that peak, the management duration could extend. There could be a lot more things that could be done. So you will get past the campfire, the burn, the brush fire that's coming through the city. EAB death curve, I'm not 100% with this one yet, only because in ground zero, yes, a lot of the ash trees are gone. But again, I got some photos near the end I want to get to show you that emerald ash borer is still here. Or not emerald ash borer. Yeah, emerald ash borer is still here, and so are ash trees.
Did they, in your area, did they release the predatory wasps?
Parasitoids were not leased in urban areas. Far up in northern Michigan by Traverse City, which is, if you think of Michigan, the mitten, all the way up by the tip, and a little to the left is where they did a lot of the parasitoid releases. And to date, I have not heard any parasitoids being trapped and found the very next year just yet. So they're not sure if they're being established or getting established or not yet. But they continue to have to try because urban forest and forest are two different strategies. And I do think that there's value in continuing with the parasitoids because in the big picture, in the long term, the forest needs it. But in an urban setting, it's not working fast enough to preserve trees like this. Another thing is what's happened is that ash trees, when they die, they become very brittle very fast. And it's not just above grade, it's below grade also. They actually get a root rot and they actually just topple over unexpectedly. So if you're not going to do anything with them and they start to decline and die, you're going to have to get them out of there right away. It's safer not only for the residents, but it's actually safer for your tree guys like myself, because some of these trees, you can't even really fell them properly because the root zone is below grade, has been so degraded and rotted out that you can't even properly fell these trees. You can't tie into them, you can't do anything, and they're actually a very hazard to remove. So pick a strategy, stick with it, go with it, implement it. This is the document I was telling you about. Michigan State University has this, you can get a copy of it. It's on emeraldashborer.info. It's a great, great tool. I am in the Midwest, most of us have it. But if you're in an area that's new to EAB, grab it. All the university extensions that are in the Midwest that dealt with us right off the bat. Again, Michigan State with Deb McCullough and Dave Smitley, Ohio State, Dan Herms, Cliff Sadoff. God, we had some great guys on this. So there's a lot of great information in this. So grab it, own it, live it, read it, implement a plan. This is Deb McCullough's in 2007. So we treated in 2006. Kind of shows you some of the products that were floating to the top. triage, boom, 100% mortality. Another one of Deb's by next year, 2008, couldn't find any larvae. Amazing, found a product. Changed the game on emerald ash borer. Early days, Grosse Pointe Shores, trees on the left, treated 3 times in 3 years. Could not get the emerald ash borer under control. So what happens? The removals change the whole aesthetics of this downtown community. So not all products out there are effective. Triage, again, 4% emamectin benzoate was designed primarily for a product that could have a residual in a tree. We did it, got it into the studies, proved that yes, it is highly, highly effective against emerald ash borer and up to 50 other pests. If you guys are dealing with not only emerald ash borer, but if you guys got stuff like Lepidoptera or bark beetles, amazing the control that you can get on an evergreen. Great product, great label. Check it out. R10. R10 was a product that I was playing with the research department for 6 years now. Triage is a very viscous product. It's tough to get into a tree. So what we did is we were playing around with it. We actually made one that was twice the concentration. So you had to put half in to get the same amount of control. R10 is another great product that you should probably, if you haven't used it yet, get a good look at. Get the label and do a little research on it. It may be the tool that you need for your program. Great product. What's treatable? We talked about this. 60% would be removal. 20-30% tops. Unless it's a highly valuable tree, you got time to prune it back and get it under control, 25-30% treatable. After that, cut your losses, treat the trees you can, and get rid of some of the weaker trees. Chicago, see what time we got. All right, I'm gonna go real fast. I'm sorry, guys. This is the city of Chicago. They didn't want to do anything with this. That tree the next year, we treated the tree. We looked the other way.
If we go over on time, Joe, when I submit this for CEUs, I can get an additional quarter credit or something like that. I think they do it in 15-minute increments. So don't. Okay,
we might be a couple minutes over. So everybody out there, thanks for if you hang in there. Thanks, I appreciate it. We'll get you guys. That's a great point, Emmett. We'll get you a couple extra, a half a CEU or something. We'll get something for you. So city of Chicago, early days, no, I didn't want to treat this tree. We turned around and that was the first tree that the city of Chicago treated. That tree looks amazing today. All the other trees that we didn't treat are dead, but all the tree on that street that we treated to this day are phenomenal. The city of Chicago, you want to talk about a nightmare, had over 80,000 urban street trees that they had to come up with a treatment plan. And my hat goes off to the city of Chicago because they did such an amazing job on figuring a program to preserve their urban forestry and their urban forest that I just can't say enough about a great job that they did, along with the city of Milwaukee. City of Milwaukee had 32,000 street trees that were ash trees and got on it early and preserved, and neither one of them, due to emerald ash borer, have lost any trees because of that. Treatment myths. If you treat your tree for 10 years, it'll weaken and die. Nope. ISA published a study finding long-term injury. It wasn't, ISA published it, but it was actually by a grad student, Sarah Green, who did a thesis for her master's on treatments and the wounding of wood behind injection sites. That study is available. If you let us know, I'll try to find it for you. One of the comments we say, well, how long can you treat a tree? And I says, well, how long can you pull maple syrup out of a maple tree? It's kind of a quick way to say that we've been poking holes in trees for years. Are you prolonged to and inevitable to treat it forever? It'll be another tree. I think ash trees will be another tree in the landscapes that will always have to be under our maintenance. Can we extend treatment windows? Probably. But if there's emerald ash borer in the area, 2 to 3 years in between would probably be the max. You can roll the dice like I have and keep an eye on it if you're on the property regularly. But just keep an eye on it if emerald ash borer has been through there. Our organic products work just as well. We're still
touch on that with what's going on in Canada with azaduractin.
It's interesting in Canada, not to pick on anybody up there, but with the pesticide ban, they are not allowed to use triage. So we have Imajet up there, which is a pretty good product, but it's not triage. Another product out there that everybody's using is a neem product. And the neem product will hold off emerald ash borer until the population gets to a certain pressure, and then it collapses and the tree dies. Unfortunately, a lot of the foresters in Canada are using it to slow the spread to get the trees down fast enough. I love the idea of having an azaduractin that's that aggressive against an insect that's that aggressive, but I have not seen it work well enough over the years to be confident with it. And again, that's me. I've seen a lot through the years, and I would be careful if I pick that, especially if you're on the uphill curve of an emerald ash borer infestation. Is it too early to treat? 10, 15 miles from a known infestation, you better be coming up with a plan, because before you know it, it will be there. And you can't protect large ash trees. Well, I proved them wrong on that one too. This is the largest white ash tree, and that is me back in 2000, and probably one of the first times 10 years ago when my beard wasn't as white. That tree is still amazing. It's still growing. Yes, you can preserve anything that you want. So from the biggest tree, which is 87 inches, the Michigan DNR, we just adopted the 2 largest black ash trees in North America. We're going to preserve those. If you have a tree that you want to preserve, we can do it. This is today. This is Michigan. This is yesterday. This is a woodlot next to my house. There's a great picture of a D exit hole. It's a true D. When you see it, you'll know what a D exit hole is. This was next to a customer's house in a woodlot. Nobody wanted to take ownership of it. The trees are dying. They're starting to fall, so they had to flop them into the swamp to get them off the lady's house. This is still a common sight in Michigan. There's still dead standing trees from the previous years. But we went into the woods, and if you see the picture on the left, ash trees are regenerating. The picture in the middle is a good buddy of mine, Kevin Bingham. This is we talked about a tree that was 80% declined. The tree died anyways, and we took it down. This is one of the very first trees that we did a destructive autopsy on, and showed that even though there was not enough foliage in the canopy to translocate the product, where it did, whenever emerald ash borer larvae came in contact with that compound, they died. So even a tree that far gone, there was still some efficacy of any larva that touched it died. So it was kind of a sink tree in that neighborhood. The picture on the right, if you walk through that little woodlot, that's my son right there, and he's got his hands on 2 little ash trees. That whole woodlot is full of small ash trees regenerating. So emerald ash borer is not going anywhere. I know it's going to take years to figure out the next wave. We'll get rid of these or not, but we got to give trees a little bit of credit and realize that they're going to try to survive just like we want them to survive. And in this little woodlot in an urban area, ash trees are still going strong. Field support. I know we ran over a little bit, but we got a great team out there. Emmett mentioned a bunch of tree nerds. All of our guys out there, most of us are all arborists, certified arborists, and we're here to help. Again, my day-to-day territory is the Great Lakes in Canada, but I serve the United States and all of Canada for education and support for all of our other RTMs. You can see Emmett's down there in South Central. We got some really good guys throughout the rest of the country. We brought on some more help in the Hort side with Eric, Rebecca, and Corinne. So we got a lot of people out there to help you guys. All you got to do is reach out and let us know, and be more than happy to do what we can to support you guys. Let me see if I got your picture. There's your picture. So I wanted to thank you guys and maybe hang out for a couple seconds, give Emmett a minute to wrap up too, and then see if Zach has got some good questions we can answer before we let you guys go back to enjoy this beautiful day. Emmett?
Yeah, I think, as, being in kind of there's not too many new places that EAB can get to. Really major metropolitan areas with lots of ash. I think Denver, Colorado is probably the biggest one that's left as it's progressed west, covering Kansas and Missouri. It was found in KC back in 2012. You go west of Kansas City, there's nothing there, some smaller towns, Topeka and Manhattan, Lawrence. There's not going to be any more huge metropolitan areas like Chicago or Minneapolis or Milwaukee, that are going to be affected by this. It's kind of a shame because now we have all of this information. Now that it's kind of reached its, we have all the research done. We got 15 or plus years of critical research done. Purdue with Cliff Sadoff has done some amazing stuff on how metro areas and municipalities should manage this. He laid it all out with data and dollars, and basically it's remove 1/3 of your trees that are in unfavorable places or unfavorable conditions, and then get your other 2/3 on a treatment plan. And he's with what you're showing in your backyard tree, how long triage lasts, he's recommending a 3-year cycle. And so there's just so much great information out there, and EAB is almost run its course through the United States. I say almost. I think it's always going to stick around. It's going to be a chronic problem. And hopefully these parasitoid wasps can get a foothold and can be around to keep that population in check. But the thing with these beneficials is they rely on that pest to be present. They rely on EAB. So there's always going to be an equilibrium of parasitoid wasps. They need a population of EAB. So they will never kill it all the way. There will always be populations of EAB popping up and reinfesting trees.
Hey, Emmett, it's interesting. You mentioned earlier when you talked a little bit about Texas and the value of shade. I was wondering, when we look at the cost benefit calculator, the value of trees, obviously it looks like you got ash trees, can thrive out there. Is there a difference in value? In the Midwest, it's pretty common. We have maples, oaks. It's pretty wooded. Is there a different value? Do people appreciate and value trees maybe a little bit more out there because they have fewer?
Yes. Absolutely. I see that all the time when I go to West Texas or I go to Oklahoma, parts of Kansas, where, it's Great Plains. And so all the trees are planted. And so you have folks, especially in older homeowners, that maybe they grew up on a farm, out in rural Oklahoma or West Texas somewhere. And now they've moved to town and they have a shade tree. They will do anything to keep it. Because they live without trees and they understand the value that they give to your home and the beauty that they give to your landscape. Let's try to tackle some of these questions here. I think
let's get rid.
Oh man, some people.
All right. Well, before you do that, let me wrap up and say thank you for putting this program together. As always. You two are a wealth of knowledge. Joe, it was great to have a history lesson. Emmett, it was great to see kind of the younger spin on the emerging markets that EAB is still working its way into. So I feel like it was a great mesh of old school, new school, Arborjet Joe, master certified arborist Emmett, getting this info out there. I'm going to stop the recording before we get into the questions.